Hey everybody, it is Big Dave, and today I'm working on an original Xbox, not an Xbox 360 like normal. This is actually a working Xbox, so we're just going to be opening it up, which as you can see I've already done, clean it out, and do some hardware upgrades. The reason I already opened it is because honestly, opening up an original Xbox is pretty boring. You just turn it over and pull out a few screws and then pull the lid off. There's not much to it. I have also taken out the DVD drive. The DVD drive was the one part of this Xbox that was not working, and I'm not going to be replacing it. I don't really care about the DVD drive. I'm going to be putting in a much larger hard drive, and we're going to be hard modding it with an Open Xenium chip, which will really just make it so you don't need the DVD drive to play any games. All your games will be played directly off the hard drive. One thing I did notice when taking it apart is that there is quite a bit of damage to the surrounding metal cage that the motherboard sits in, and at least a good portion of it is caused by a capacitor leaking. This is a common problem in most old Xboxes, not the last run of models. The last run was a 1.6 version that doesn't have that clock capacitor leaking issue, but most models older than that do. And if you look in here, you can see that the metal, particularly in this area, is extremely rusted and deteriorating. But there's also some hints of other liquid damage here on the sides and stuff. I think we may actually have a combination of the clock capacitor leaking out everywhere, and then maybe some condensation or other kind of liquid dripping down in here and just exacerbating the problem. And we're actually lucky that the Xbox motherboard sits lifted up off the base of the console, so all the liquid that did get in here just kind of settled on the bottom, on the metal, and caused most of the damage there rather than settling directly on the motherboard. Now, of course, where the capacitor leaked, that did leak out onto the motherboard, so we will definitely need to, one, remove that busted clock capacitor, and two, clean the area thoroughly with isopropyl alcohol. Now, if I wanted to get this console back to stock working condition, I would need to replace that clock capacitor because it's what keeps the date and time current. But since we're going to be hard modding this, honestly, that doesn't matter anymore. So once I remove this capacitor, it's just going to stay gone. Now, after pulling out all the guts in here, you can really see the extent of the damage that was caused to this metal cage. In some places, it's actually rusted straight through the metal and has put holes in the side of this cage. Now, theoretically, I could clean this up and still use this cage, but honestly, the metal in it is now weakened, and this rust could just continue to eat away at it forever, even if I think I've cleaned it up successfully. So what I'm going to do is order a Xbox cage and housing off eBay. It's not terribly expensive, and we'll just put the old guts into a new case. One of the first things I want to do is get these heat sinks off and replace all this old, crusty, terrible thermal paste that's on here. That alone will help this Xbox live a longer, better life. So the Open Xenium install is going to be fairly straightforward. The first thing I have to do is install this pin header. Really, that's the majority of the work for this particular model of Xbox. If this was a model 1.6 Xbox, which was the last model they made, I would have to do a little bit more work attaching wires in a few different places to get it to work right. But on all prior models, all you have to do is put in this pin header, solder it down, and then solder one single wire. So it's quite an easy install. So I've got the pin header installed. I can just put the Open Xenium chip directly on that, and then we'll get the one single wire installed that we have to do. So then I'm just gonna put the board and all the basic components back in the shell, including this brand new fan. I'm replacing the original stock fan with this updated fan that is a lot quieter than the original stock Xbox fan. I'm just zip tying it in place because it doesn't fit exactly where the old fan used to go. Then we're going to put in the power supply and screw everything down, just get it in place and plug it into the main board along with the controller ports. And now we can actually just test it. I don't have to put it back together completely or anything. I can test it, and I can tell by the way that the light is pulsing on the top of the chip that I do have a successful install. So my LEDs I get are just strips that I get in these rolls off Amazon. They are not expensive at all. They're just 12 volts, so you just wire them up to a 12 volt source. In the original Xbox, you can pull 12 volts from different places. I like to pull mine directly from the hard drive power cable. If you look at the hard drive power cable, it's one of these old Molex style power cables. The yellow wire is going to be my 12 volt, and the black wire right next to it is going to be my ground. So I'm just going to splice directly into these wires to get my power. So then I'm going to run my spliced wire directly into the first strip of lights. We'll run that up to the second strip of lights that goes along the left. And then connected to that, we will attach the secondary fan that I'm going to be installing. The fan is also a 12 volt fan, so it can just come right off here without having to worry about adding any kind of resistors or anything like that. So once I got all those lights ready to go, the last thing I'm going to do in terms of lights is take off the original LEDs from the power and eject buttons, and I'm going to swap them out with green LEDs that are more like the green light strips I'm putting in. It's more of a neon green rather than kind of a pine green, which is what the original Xbox green is. Once I get that all done, I can plug it in, turn it on, and test and make sure all those lights come on just fine. So now I'm just gonna run the lights down the bottom front of the console, and I want to make sure those are nice and secure, and then run the lights along the left side and secure those as well. I'm going to use some zip ties to make sure those stay in place. Then I'm going to install the front DVD drive bezel on this little bracket that I bought off Etsy. It's going to screw into the front and make it look like the DVD drive is there instead of a big gaping hole. I'll put a link to the store on Etsy where I bought these below. Next step, of course, is to put the hard drive in here. Now, I've already got the hard drive loaded up with all the apps, the dash, and everything. It's a SATA drive, so I'm going to be using this IDE to SATA adapter. And I'm also putting in a new, better IDE cable, which will work a lot better with this SATA drive, and is actually necessary to get it to work right. Here's the top shell of the Xbox. I've already got the lines drawn in where I'm going to cut out the windows, and these little circles are just marked where the screws go in to hold the top shell in place, so I want to be sure not to cut too close to those. And here's a view of the system powering on with all the hardware mods in place. All the lights looking good. It's a very bright green power button, bright green interior. The secondary fan works, the chip is on and working. Everything's looking good. You get a good glow in the ports. And this is in the dark, by the way. That's why it looks so bright, but everything looks really good. We can see the Xenium chip is working well, and here's the homebrew dash with all the games installed on it on the hard drive. Everything's ready to go. So I just need to put the top shell back on now that I have the windows in there ready to go. Get it all screwed down and secured, and then we can take one final look at it with the overhead lights off so the green shows up nice and bright. You can see all the hardware modifications through the windows, and here is the final console. Everything turned out great. I hope everybody enjoyed watching this video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to visit my Etsy shop for all of my modded consoles. I am Big Dave, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.